everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live. My name is Teresa Morrison, and I'm the Communications Coordinator with Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberland. And today I am here with a special guest, Legal Aid Society attorney Tom Shazwansky. I'm so sorry. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about different aspects of reentry work and community reentry. But before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and walk us through a little bit about Legal Aid Society. So many people wonder what Legal Aid Society is. We are a 501c3 private nonprofit law firm that provides education and representation in civil matters for low-income individuals, families, and seniors who normally could not afford legal services. Our mission is to advance, defend, and enforce the legal rights of low income and vulnerable people in order to secure for them the basic necessities of life. A little bit about us: we are actually the largest nonprofit law firm in Tennessee. We work with about 48. We work in about 48 different counties with about 32 attorneys and 8 offices across Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands. Some of our practice areas, we cover elder law, employment, housing, family law, and domestic violence. And some of our offices that are in those service areas, we have a few listed right over here on the right-hand side of our screen. And just a disclaimer about our presentation today and a little bit of information. This information provided in the presentation cannot take place of legal advice. Each case is different and needs individual attention. So if you need specific information about your case or something like that, please call Legal Aid Society at 1-800-238-1443. That information is also located in the ticker down at the bottom of our screen. If you end up missing the presentation or would like to go back and review information in this presentation, you can actually rewatch it. It's being recorded right now. You can watch it on our YouTube channel, or you can reaccess it on our Facebook page. We'll pin it to the top of our page once that presentation is over. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tom.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom, and I am the lead attorney in the Community Reentry Practice Group. As Teresa mentioned, I'm based out of Nashville, and our office is sort of the hub for community reentry matters throughout our service area of 48 counties. As Teresa pointed out, we have 8 different offices. So if you have issues that take us outside of Davidson County, that's not a problem. We coordinate with our other offices and our other kind of counties, and we coordinate the work that needs to get done. So even if you have issues that are outside the greater Nashville area, please feel free to contact us. And that's about all I have by way of introduction. I will let Teresa cue up the next slide.
All right. So before we get to the next slide, just kind of wanting to know, what are the most important things to understand about the community reentry process?
Sure. There are kind of what I like to call the big 3 pillars of the community reentry process. And the sort of menu of services that we offer, it's designed to address specific legal needs that tend to be faced by people who are transitioning back into their communities. That being said, even for folks who are past the transitioning process, we can still help you with these things. We get a lot of clients who come to us 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line with questions about reentry issues. We're here for those folks as well. So don't feel like there's a certain amount of time that goes by where we'll no longer be help you. So the big 3 aspects are court costs, expungements, and issues concerning driver's license and driver's license reinstatements. We're going to get into those a little bit more in depth, but those are kind of the general areas where people face problems. So the first of the quote-unquote big 3 is court costs. A lot of folks realize when they transition out of incarceration, they realize, or they may not realize, that that they have court costs. And it's something that may not be obvious. It's something that we will look into. Basically, if you have court costs, what you cannot do is, well, if you have court costs, there are a number of consequences to that. First of all, in order for us to perform further reentry services like expungement and driver's license issues, which we're going to talk about, all of outstanding court costs and fees have to be addressed. And that does not necessarily mean that you have to pay them out of your pocket. What we generally do for folks at the income levels that we deal with is for folks who do have court costs, we will help our clients file applications with the court where you're essentially giving them some financial information and saying, I've got these court costs. I'm not in a position to pay them, and it's completely holding up my life. And generally, a court will grant a full waiver of costs. So the first thing that we want to do is to address cost issues. And again, that's going to affect expungement. It's going to affect driver's licenses. As the note here at the bottom points out, simply having unpaid court costs for a certain period of time, that by itself is a reason that a driver's license may be revoked or suspended. So that's one of the many reasons that we want to deal with the court costs. Not to mention the fact that these are outstanding debts that you don't want assessed against you. So if we can clear those off, we will do so. That's sort of our first step. Teresa, next slide, please. Okay, so moving on from court costs. So court costs is step one. In order to deal with expungements, court costs have to be dealt with first. So it's kind of a series of court costs first, and now we're going to talk about expungement. So expungement is sort of one of the magical words that people hear. All this really means is removing information from one's criminal record. This basically falls into two categories. There are expungements that get rid of dismissed charges or charges that weren't otherwise prosecuted. Those I call the kind of junk charges. And then there is a second type of expungement which can actually remove convictions or guilty pleas. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Again, the important thing here is that the court costs are paid. The note at the bottom here about the costs, those costs have actually recently been eliminated. So at least in Davidson County, all expungements are free. There is no cost due to the DA's office. However, this does vary from county to county. So those are just a couple things to keep in mind. And why don't we move on to the next slide? The other aspect of expungement that we deal with involves removing folks from offender registries. That includes the sexual offender registry, vulnerable adult abuse registry, Department of Child Services registry. So those kind of fall under the umbrella of expungement. Can we get the next slide, please? And now to circle back again, driver's license issues. Court costs are one big problem that folks face as they're transitioning. But there are, at last count, there are about 164 different reasons that the Department of Driver Safety may revoke or suspend a license. So what we'll do is we work with folks who have driver's license issues. We work directly with the Department of Safety Driver Services, basically to get a checklist from them of what needs to happen in order for someone to get their driving license to be restored. And then we can basically help folks navigate through that. And what that means is showing that outstanding fines for traffic violations are paid, that court costs, again, have been addressed. There may be issues where someone's been involved in a car wreck in the past and they've been sued and there's a judgment against them that was not satisfied. That's something that you do definitely need a lawyer to help you with. And we can also help with kind of other issues like alcohol and drug awareness programs, ignition interlock issues, things like that. So basically, if you've got some troubles with your driver's license, definitely feel free to turn to us as a resource. That's kind of, again, that's one of the cornerstones of our menu of services. That is pretty much what I have to say on those big three. Teresa, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, so I just want to check real quick to make sure we don't have any questions in the comments. And as of right now, we don't. But I did have some questions regarding expungement, if you don't mind me asking those.
Sure, go right ahead.
So one of the big questions that I have is, can anything and everything be expunged from a person's record?
No. Uh, there basically are lists of the types of offenses that can be expunged or cannot be expunged. It is not the case that simply because a period of time passes by, whether it's 10 years or 30 years, there's no automatic amount of time that entitles you to have things expunged from your record. Uh, there is a detailed list, which Teresa, she's going to post a link to that in the chat. Um, there's a detailed list there. When it comes to the misdemeanors, the list tells you what misdemeanors cannot be expunged. So again, with misdemeanors, the list tells you what cannot be expunged. And then with the felony lists, it tells you what can be expunged. So in other words, if you're looking to expunge a felony potentially, you're going to want to see if it's on one of the felony lists. If you're looking to expunge a misdemeanor, you're going to look at the misdemeanor list, and if your charge is on the list, then it's not expungible. So the felony and misdemeanor lists work backwards. I
Okay.
think it's laid out fairly straightforwardly in the information that you link to.
Perfect. All right. And still no questions in the comments, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward with my next question. Is it true that after a certain amount of time passes, charges automatically become eligible for expungement?
Again, and that ties into what I was saying earlier, but the answer is no. There is, unfortunately, there's no automatic time period. Things that are not eligible for expungement
Mm-hmm.
don't become eligible for expungement after time passes. So really what it turns on is those lists that we just talked about and whether your offenses are eligible for expungement or not. As a general rule, and again, I will refer you to the lists, but just speaking broadly, and as a general rule, convictions for violent crimes, as well as convictions for serious drug charges, whether misdemeanors or felonies, those generally cannot be expunged. But again, I'll refer you back to that full list.
Okay. And then for those of us who might get an expungement, but still have convictions on their records, what else can they do?
Okay, well, so if you've gone through the expungement process, if you've cleaned up all the junk, your record is going to look cleaner to somebody who's looking it over, but you may still have some convictions or guilty pleas on there. There are several legal tools that can be used even for somebody who's in this position. The first tool is to petition for a restoration of your citizenship rights. And Teresa, if you could just flip to the next slide, please. Basically, as you probably know, when one is convicted of a felony, one generally loses a number of citizenship rights, including the right to vote, the right to hold public office, certain rights with respect to firearms. Those are all kind of taken away from somebody upon a conviction. Once you have been outside, you can file a petition to have those rights reinstored. You do have to wait until the expiration of your sentence for the disqualifying felony, but you can then apply to the court. And basically, what this is an application where you submit positive character references and evidence, and a judge is going to review all that information, as well as other information that the judge may have access to. And basically, your job is simply to show the judge that you have sustained the character of a person of honesty, respectability, and veracity, and is generally regarded as such by their neighbors. That is a quote from How the Law Reads. What that means in plain English is essentially that you have stayed out of trouble, that you're on a path to move forward, and that you are a honest person, you're part of your community, and that your neighbors would basically tell anybody the same thing. In other words, you have a reputation for being a good citizen, essentially. And if you can basically convince the judge of that, then the judge will issue a court order, and it will state specifically which rights are being reinstored. Not necessarily all of them will be reinstored at once, but the typical ones are, again, the right to vote is something that can be restored. That's slightly a different process, but it's part of the restoration of citizenship rights. The right to sit in a jury, right to hold public office, certain gun-related rights depending on your particular situation. These are all rights that you can have restored, which is to say that just because you're convicted of a felony and lose these rights doesn't mean that they're gone forever. It takes a little bit of work, but we can get you through it, and we can get you voting again, and we can get your other citizenship rights restored to the extent that we can. So that's thing number one that you can do, regardless of what is still on your record. As far as voting rights specifically, I'll just mention that you have to wait only until the maximum sentence for the disqualifying felony has concluded, or until you've completed your probation, which is whichever of the two is later. Basically, you can apply for a restoration of voter rights in the same court proceeding where you apply for your general restoration of citizenship. There are some different forms, but the court is actually the one to fill out the forms, and they forward those on to the Department of Elections. So if you have a hearing on your restoration of citizenship rights, you can also address voting rights in that same hearing. The last tool, which is perhaps the most important, Teresa, if you could hit the next slide, please. There's a tool called a certificate of employability, and this is something that a lot of people don't know about. A certificate of employability, you can apply for one immediately. There is no waiting period as soon as you are transitioning back into your community. Basically, this is, again, it's an application to the court with positive character references, and the standard is exactly the same. The judge basically has to be convinced that you are serious about your second chance, that you're a part of your community, that you're taking steps to better yourself, and that you don't really pose a danger to anybody. So because these are the same legal standards, again, this can be done at the same time that you petition for your restoration of citizenship rights. And you can essentially get citizenship rights generally, plus voting rights, plus a certificate of employability, all in one hearing. There are a number of advantages to having a certificate of employability. First of all, without getting into too much legal detail, a certificate of employability presents the employer with a number of benefits to hiring you. Basically, it protects the employer from certain kind of lawsuits. It can protect the employer against actions of an employee who does something wrong. And basically, if you're standing in line looking for the same job, standing next to somebody with the same criminal record, if you have a certificate of employability in your hand, it's going to make you a lot more likely to get that job. There are a couple of surveys that were done, one in the Washington, D.C. area. That survey showed that folks who have a certificate of employability are almost 50% more likely to get a job as compared to a similar candidate without a certificate of employability. There was another study, which I believe was in Ohio, where somebody holding a certificate of employability but with a felony record, they were essentially getting jobs at the same rate as somebody with no record at all. So the certificate of employability, it says a couple things. First of all, to the employer, it says that you're serious about the process, that you've met with attorneys, that you are pursuing all of the legal options you have available, and that you've gone through this process. So that just in and of itself shows that you're a serious candidate. You're prepared to take the steps that you need to take to get your life back on track, and basically that you're taking the process seriously. Another benefit of a certificate of employability is that Tennessee requires occupational licenses for folks who may be working in a lot of different areas. Some of the examples of occupational licenses would be contractors. That's kind of an obvious one. But the state of Tennessee has a lot of peculiar things for which you also need a license. So just by way of example, if you wanted to work as a tattoo artist, you would need to get an occupational license. If you want to work as a massage therapist, you need an occupational license. There's a long list, but the takeaway point is that if you are moving forward and you get into an employment situation, if you come to an opportunity that will require you to have an occupational license, if you have the certificate of employability already in hand, the law presumes that you're entitled to the license, which basically means that if you are applying for a license out of thin air and they look at your criminal background, the scales basically start tipped against you, and you have to tip the scales all the way back the other way to show that you're entitled to a license. If you have the certificate of employability, it goes the other way around. It starts off with the scales tipped already in your favor. And if somebody wants to give some reason that you shouldn't get the license, they're the ones who have to tip the scales all the way back. So again, this is a huge benefit of the certificate of employability if and when you get to that point, because there probably will be a point where you do want to look into getting an occupational license. So essentially, even for the folks who go through the cost waiver process and they go through the expungement process, they get their driver's license back. You may still have some things on your criminal background. But again, we encourage people to use these additional tools because they are a huge benefit when you're looking for employment. They can help when you're looking for housing. They can help when you're looking for specific government benefits. So I would definitely encourage all of you, if you have the opportunity to have a one-on-one with an attorney, bring up the issue of certificates of employability because it's a very good tool to be aware of.
Great. And then I'm going to see, just looking in our chat real quick, if there are any more questions. I do not see any more questions, Tom.
Okay, well, we'll remind folks that sometimes this kind of forum is difficult because questions can get very personal. As Teresa pointed out, the purpose of this presentation is just to give a general overview of services that are out there. We want folks to understand that they have options. We want to encourage folks to pursue those options. We spend a lot of time going out and educating the community about those options. But at the end of the day, everybody's situation is different. And especially when it comes to expungement, for example, it's very much a case-by-case analysis. So the facts of your particular situation and scenario make all the difference. And oftentimes it may be something that to a non-lawyer looks completely insignificant, but a lawyer may spot it. And especially in the expungement forum, because there are a lot of moving pieces, sometimes situations that look really desperate at first glance are actually fixable. That just takes time and consultation and a little bit of research on your situation. So for those who didn't want to ask questions in the chat, that's fine. Teresa is going to encourage you to reach out to us. And in order to address your specific concerns, it's best to have a one-on-one so you can really speak your mind and paint the whole picture for us.
Yes. And then again, this is not legal advice. So if you do have any issues that we may be able to assist with, you can call our office at 1-800-238-1443. Thank you again, Tom, for coming on our live tonight. I really appreciate it. And I just hope all of you. You're welcome. And you guys have a wonderful night. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for your time.